A familiar special guest joins us today as we look back on our last 100 episodes and think towards the future. So join us today on the Happy Holy Hour. Welcome to the Happy Holy Hour, a podcast where everyday Christians grow in their faith through biblical examination and insightful discussion. I'm glad you're here today. If you enjoy the content you're about to hear, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And visit us at thehappyholyhour.org. Let's get started. It's our centennial episode today. I guess we can finally say that. We reached 100.
So old.
To celebrate, we have a familiar special guest with us today, Jared. He's back. How are you, buddy?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. How you doing?
Doing great.
Is he even a guest? You know, it feels weird calling him a guest because
I feel bad because we never formally announced Jared's departure. He just kind of disappeared around episode 50.
Oops,
it was a quiet leaving.
Yeah. Nothing suspicious.
People, I wonder if anybody was really wondering, what happened.
Is he dead?
There were conspiracy theories over what happened to Jared.
I could see that. I could see that happening.
Was he an unrepentant sin, and they were trying to keep it under wraps, or the next article for some watchdog blog online, Christian watchdog blog
on our podcast? Yeah, I'm sure that's very realistic. No, but I do feel bad though. I think so. We record episodes so far in advance that when Jared had stepped down, we just kind of got lost in the schedule and we got booted from our recording studio. So it was kind of it was just a crazy time.
Well, I think there was I don't know, I'd have to go back and look at notes and stuff, but I think we had planned on doing an episode where Jared was on and we it was a final episode goodbye thing, but then I think it just never panned out. And then I think we just never mentioned it from there because I think you're right. That was right in the middle. We were losing the studio space and trying to figure other things out. So I don't know. It just got lost in the shuffle. And then it was so long since it happened that we were be awkward if we mentioned it now.
So basically it's just well, Jared who?
Jared who? Yeah, what are you talking about?
If there are any conspiracy theories, though, I want to know. I hope there are, and I want to know, but I want to squash it right now. Everything's A-okay. It's just
we're not big enough, and it'd be weird if there was one. But you know how they have fan pages, Facebook group fan pages and stuff, or forums online. You can just see them chatting, what happened? What do you think happened to Jared?
A forum on Reddit.
Some over obsessive fan is got their whole mapped out wall of
they've got little figurines
dedicated to last year.
No, but it's so good to have Jared back on. We're just gonna do some catching up on life today and so people
can actually find out what actually happened.
Yeah, and then we're gonna establish kind of a new release schedule going into the new year. We'll get to that in a little bit, but yeah, man, how are you guys doing? I mean, life's been crazy over the past year. We've been doing this podcast for about 2 years. Mm-hmm. What's new? What's been going on with you guys?
Jared, you need to start because everybody listening really just cares about. We've heard about
the whole reason. Yeah, that's the whole reason everyone's here, right?
That's right. That's why they kept listening. That's the only reason people kept listening. They didn't care about our past content since you left. They just were maybe he'll be back. Maybe he'll be back.
Holding on to hope.
And now
the prodigal son has returned.
Just drop off after this.
What's new? Where do I start? In the last year, I had a baby, and that is insane and awesome. She's a little human learning things, so and it blows my mind.
How old is she now?
She is 18 months.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Yeah.
She's so cute.
So it's been a little bit over a year. She's crazy. Literally, she got my genes of insanity. She looks like Natalie. She's adorable and cute, but she is clumsy and crazy, just like me. Outside of that, my family picked up and went full-time vocational ministry. I'm working at a camp where I do food and ministry at the same time.
It's right up your alley. I love it.
It's literally, it's insane because for the longest time I wanted to do ministry and I wanted to do food. I didn't know how to make the 2 mix.
Just whoop.
And God is like
the Geico commercial.
Here's everything.
Some things are just better together.
Exactly. And so it's been a wild ride, just like moving here. God has literally given everything that we need to us, and not just what we need, but things that we want too. And it's just been a very humbling and insane experience. And God has really just blessed us in that. On top of that, we're expecting another kid.
Yeah.
Which actually we are 2.5 months away from that.
You looked at your watch. You looked at your watch, and I thought you were going to say we are 2.5 hours away.
We're supposed to go to the hospital as soon as we're done
I'm
here.
putting it off.
I told her to wait. Man, that's crazy. I think last time we saw you guys, I don't know how far along she was then. That's crazy. Wow, it goes by fast. It goes by fast when you're not the ones pregnant.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like with Tilly, I felt like it went on forever. Like we were just waiting and waiting and waiting. And this time around, it's like, wow, I can't believe it's already going to be only 2 months away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's nuts. But we're really excited. We don't know what we're going to have. We're going to do a home birth with a midwife, and it's going to be a whole new experience, but it's going to be so much fun. I'm really excited for it. And it's a blessing from the Lord for sure. And lastly, getting a new leg in like 2 weeks.
Fantastic.
So like the Lord has blessed us with that, and I'm excited for that. So that's.
I guess we had that. Maybe we should explain a little bit for our listeners who have joined us since Jared left.
Jared had lost his leg in a shark attack incident in. No, I'm just kidding.
Is that the story we're going?
No, it wasn't. No, it was actually the war.
It was the war.
Back in Nam.
Jared's actually 120 years old.
Yeah.
No, you had lost your leg as an infant, correct?
Yeah. So I was born with my femur that stopped growing before I was born, and then when I was born, it started growing again. So I lost 50% growth. Then the doctors decided just to amputate my foot, leave my heel, give me a prosthetic to learn to walk on, and I've had it my whole life. And it's crazy because, like, you know, my whole life I was always told, you're not going to be able to do X, you're not going to be able to do Z, you're not going to be able to do Y. And, you know, I've always blown those categories. And looking back on it now, I can say, you know, every step that I take is because God has gifted it to me.
Praise God.
Yeah. And so I'm super grateful for it, and I would never want it any other way.
So awesome. Is this replacing your yellow leg?
Yeah, I'm getting the running blade.
Ooh.
Yeah, I demoed it last week. It's so nice.
Can you jump really high with it?
Probably just as high as I can now, but who knows? I didn't
For those of you who don't know, Jared can currently jump 6 feet. This is vertical.
6 feet horizontally.
Oh man, no, that's awesome, man. That's so good. I know those legs are they're really hard to get just because of all of the logistics and stuff. That's super cool that you're getting a new one.
Yeah, what a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been married for 7 months at this point, which it's been a while. I think I've been married longer since it's been long. The amount of time that I've been married has been longer than the amount of time has been shorter than the amount of time that I've talked to Jared since. So it's been a while, but it took a while to get that out. But anyway, marriage is cool.
That's what marriage does, folks. If you're wondering,
makes you long-winded.
No, but I guess just life updates. I mean, I've been doing a lot of writing. Not only for this podcast, but also for I do book reviews occasionally for Banner of Truth, which is kind of fun. So I've been working with them to do some book review and content and that kind of stuff. But hey, it's funny. I used to hate reading, like back in college, back in high school. I used to hate it, but now I can't seem to get enough of it. And my library is ever expanding, and I think Sarah hates it, but it's fun. I can't get enough bookshelf space anymore.
That's the problem, right? They roll their eyes when you come home with another one. It's like books and guns. That's the. Did you really need another one?
I don't know though, because from what I understand, Natalie's been doing a lot of Christmas shopping, and from what she's told me, she's only got me books.
Oh yes,
a wife of virtue who can find.
Right? That's right.
They're going to be like all books on how to be a good husband or something. Like, take a hint.
How to be a husband for dummies. No, that would be for me. I'm the newbie of the group. So
the young buck.
But it's funny, young like buck. Now that it's wintertime, I'm more intensely dealing with, the reoccurring health issues that I have. I struggle with when the cold weather comes, but being able to wear like a cozy set of clothes and sit in my warm apartment and read a book.
Man.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm praising God for that. That seems like something to be thankful for. But he's given me so much, and I can't help but just reflect on his goodness and his grace as I just think on those things. But there's still many ways to grow for me. I'm trying to be content with the Lord's will and where he has me, trying to figure out like next steps for like my family, like how do we want to handle X, Y, or Z, all the things you deal with when you're a young married couple. So super fun, but it's funny. I'm not really that interesting. I'm not sure why people purposely tune into this podcast and listen to us talk.
I feel that way too.
Well, Travis, what's going on in your life, man?
Same old. No, it's a lot has changed. I mean, I don't know. It's we've been at this podcast long enough that I don't know what I've shared and what I haven't. So, but like, since the start of this podcast, man, it's been, a lot has changed. Like, it's been crazy. I mean, same as you, like just trying to be content where we're at, trying to figure out, where the Lord's leading us, what the next steps are. It's funny, when you're younger, you always think like that contentment thing, like if I could just get to the next stage, if I could just get here, things will be different. Like, you have this ideal picture in your mind, even if you don't know what that is, like you feel discontent, like, that you're on this journey. And, I still feel that way. And a lot of times, it's trust in the Lord, being content where he has me, serving faithfully in the roles he's put in front of us. But, kind of same thing. And, we felt that way when we were single, and then you get married, you feel that way. And you think, oh, we have kids, and then you have kids, you feel that way. And then like it only gets more and more like the issues you wrestle with compound, and the decisions you have to make compound, and different things like that. So, learning to be content I guess that's not really an update on where I'm at, but as an early application, learning to be content where you're at in every stage of life, because that never really actually goes away, I think.
You've changed. So when we started the podcast, we were all at the same church.
It's true.
Same ministry.
Yes.
Now we're all in 3 different churches.
A big change for all of us. I left. We were all going to the same church. I left while ago now. We've been a member of another church, local OPC church plant, for some time now. I guess a little over a year. That's been a huge blessing. Big transition for us too. Just different context of churches, but even switching churches, it was right in the middle of COVID-19, and we had 2 1-year-olds. So trying to find a church during that time was hard, but it's been a blessing being a part of that church. So just trying to get more plugged in there. And yeah, so that's a big change. We celebrate our 3rd wedding anniversary. So still young buck compared to Jared, but getting there. I feel like a little kid. I'll catch up to you someday. Like kids when they don't realize that like it never works that way.
Nope.
Our twins
are
that's right. Yeah. Our twins are over 2 years old now. So that's yeah, we're definitely in the middle of a pretty crazy stage, but fun. The 2-year-old stage. It really isn't like we think of it as just 2, but it really starts at like 1.5, I feel like, and goes to probably 3. I don't know. We're not there. We're not at the end of it yet, so I can't say. I just know we're in it right now. So you can pray for us.
Terrible twos.
Yeah, it's also really fun though. It's a really demanding stage as a parent, but like, they're learning to talk and interact and learning new things every day. And they're at this stage where they just change. I mean, infants and toddlers change a lot, but like right now it's like every day is totally different, which can be hard because you get one thing worked out and then they totally change the next day kind of thing. But so that's been a big change, and like, oh man, it just keeps going faster and faster. Life does. And then we're expecting our third child in the spring in May. So I don't think I mentioned that on the podcast before, but it's out in the open now. My wife is in second trimester now. So like you said, Jared, like I don't know, the first one seemed to take forever, and now it's just like flying. And I don't know if that's because we're so busy with the kids we already have that like, it's hard. Like it doesn't even feel like we're pregnant sometimes because we don't have time to like sit there and like, oh, we're pregnant like we did the first one, because you're just trying to keep the other ones alive.
Yep. They keep you on your feet.
Yep.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you'll never sleep again.
I mean, we've actually been like, so sleeping, it's funny, like you start off dreading the nights when they're younger, and then you switch to dreading the days. You're like, it's almost bedtime. It's almost bedtime. and then of course it switches in between there all the time. But in general, the nights are harder, I think, earlier on a lot of times, and then the days are a little harder, and you start to sleep a little more. And then we're going to reset in the spring. So
yeah, it's funny, when Tilly was first born, we dreaded like, oh no, she's going to keep us up all night and all that, and she was fine.
Yeah.
Like the whole time. And we just, last week, we just got rid of her pacifier. And now the nights have begun.
Yeah. Yeah. And earlier, then the people don't realize this too, but when they're really little, let's glean all of our wisdom, Tyler. When they're really little, they sleep quite a bit. And then they kind of regress a little bit. We had a rough stage, though, just a little bit ago. We took their cribs away and switched them out of their cribs. And that was a nightmare. And that was hard because you kind of get used to like going on no sleep when they're little. And then you get used to having sleep again. And when that gets taken away, you're like, what the heck just hit me?
It doesn't help because you have they can conspire with one another.
Oh yeah. Like, and they played, I mean, like trying to keep them in their beds. Of course, like they're in their rooms. They aren't constrained in their cribs. So they're just going to town. And it's gotten better now. Now it took about almost a week, and now it's worked out, and they're sleeping like they were. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. But that first couple of nights, I was like, "What do we do? What do we do? I'm gonna take that crib out of the dumpster. I'm gonna reassemble it. I'm gonna put him back in it."
Oh, that's funny.
So, I knew I shouldn't have taken a sledgehammer to that.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, only one. The one crib was saved for the next baby. It's just one this time. So unless they missed it the first couple ultrasounds, our 20 week is in a little bit, and so maybe, I don't know. We've had a couple ultrasounds, so I'm pretty confident that's just one. But
yeah. Well, that's cool. It's good to see that everybody's doing well. I thought it'd be fun to review kind of our favorite episodes of the last, 99 episodes that we've done. And it was hard. So I tried to put together some of my favorites and be interested to hear what you guys think. But I know I personally enjoyed first of all, when you get to 100 episodes, it's easy to forget which ones you've done. Like I looked over our list and I was like, oh wow, we did one on that. Cool. But I really enjoyed the church essentials episodes that we did, which is honestly scattered across all of them. But 38, what is a healthy church? 39, do Christians need church? We did the principles of worship, the means of grace. We talked about what it means to get the Bible right. We did a little series on regeneration, justification, sanctification, antinomianism, assurance of salvation. We did one on expository preaching, how to be a good sermon listener. Those were some of my favorites. I really enjoyed those like church essentials or really Christian essentials episodes. Those were a lot of fun. We also did one on worship, right? Episode 15, we did lyrical theology with Timothy Brindle. Really enjoyed talking about his style of music and how lyrics are important in music. And we did an episode a couple before that, 13, why what we sing matters. I really liked that. Those were just some of my favorite. What do you guys think? What were some of your favorite episodes as we just reflect on the past 2 years?
One of my favorite ones, actually, I would say my number one favorite one is when we did the 2 episodes on the gospel. I just remember when we were trying to get through that, how much the enemy was attacking us. Yeah. And there was just so much going on in our lives at that point. And it was just like, it seemed like he did not want us to share that.
Yeah.
And, you know, how much power is in the gospel, right? And it's changed centuries of people's lives because of Christ and the power of his blood. So, I mean, I think it's really cool that we made that kind of like a quintessential part of our podcast. And then another one I really liked was the Inked episode. Should Christians get tattoos?
Oh, man.
That was a really fun one. Outside of that, you know, like we did episodes. I liked the super topical ones that we did, like about like should Christians celebrate Christmas and things like that. I always found those conversations were really beneficial and uplifting. Yeah,
they're fun. I really enjoyed those.
Yeah, that was a good. I forgot we did that one, Jared, because I think Tyler was gone for that one.
I think
we were in our studio without Tyler.
I had COVID.
I think you're right.
That's right.
Try not to panic. Yeah, because I had to do everything. I was like, is this what Tyler feels like every time? That was a fun one, though. We had to do a Christmas one 2.0. I'm pretty sure none of my positions haven't revisited the subject since then. That's hard. Freaking a favorite out of 100 because so many were so good. But I mean, I'd have to agree with you, Tyler. Like the Church Essentials was a really good one, and the worship series. Both of those kind of loose series contain a lot of my favorite episodes. I think it also represented like subjects we were personally dealing with and wrestling with in our own lives. As some of the other one-off episodes as well, but you could kind of tell when we do a series that it's something we've really been thinking about and talking about on our own, and kind of some of the more one-off ones might have come about some other way, like we met someone interesting or something like that, but those longer series probably gave a good glimpse of something we were really actually dealing with. And so what we were researching, what we were talking about got applied, I think, you know, to our lives. I know it did for me. So those are some of my favorites, just not just the subject matter but also because it represented something that was really helpful to me personally and something we were dealing with. Man, some of the other ones, like all the ones where we had guests on were some of my favorite as well, just because we got to meet some really, really cool people, really great men and women of the faith, and just hear their stories. And they brought so much to the table too. A lot of them were experts in topics that we weren't. And so they could bring more to the table than we ever could for a long time. And which is one of the reasons we try to bring guests on regularly. But you mentioned Timothy Brindle. That was definitely a highlight of mine. And we had so many others too, like Reverend Drew Geisey. He's been a regular on the podcast. Every time we've had him, it's been wonderful. Same with Pastor Greg O'Brien. That's been great. Reverend Ben Alvera, hearing his testimony, where like our like jaws were like the whole time dropped.
I remember that episode being crazy. We asked one question and the answer took an hour.
Yeah.
So we had to split that up into two.
Well,
like these two questions. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I had like just the relationship we had, like I figured that was going to be the case. But it was so also good. Like I had heard a lot of his testimony before, but a lot of it too was like it filled in some of the cracks that I didn't hear before. So like hearing it in a more like drawn out fashion was like, wow.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it really was. That was cool. I mean, we had other Taylor Locke, Thaddeus, Sarah, Rowena, Allison Nunley, James Cyberman, and there's a bunch more there that I didn't even list, but all of those were really good. Like we did a series on abortion. Allison Nunley came on, talked about LGBTQ movement, and just so many so many great testimonies, but also others who just brought like expertise in their fields to the table. So those were a lot of my other favorites for sure.
It was just really cool meeting new people.
Yeah.
Doing this podcast like that.
It always impressed me that like for us, we get used to guests coming on, but I was like always impressed by people who would actually like, a lot of them hadn't met us before and didn't really know us. Like we met them in a Facebook group or something. And so, I mean, sure, it took a little bit of talking back and forth, and they probably researched us a little bit of who we are, but a lot of them like really went out on a leg to come on the show. And I think we only did like one time where we gave someone an honorarium. Like, so a lot of these people like just volunteer their time, went out on a limb, people they didn't really know, to share sometimes stuff that was really close to their heart. And, you know, so I always like respected that and thought that was pretty cool. And sometimes a little surprised, like, really, you do that? Okay, cool.
Yeah, it was fun. Well, we've been doing episodes every week for the last 2 years, which has been a blast. And starting in 2022, and I'll just allude to this real quick, we're going to be operating under a new release schedule. It's going to be more fluid than it currently is, but I'm still hoping that some structure will remain in it, but some things are going to be different. But Travis, why don't you walk us through what you're thinking as far as just kind of like another big life update for us?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of it has to do with what I've already shared. And it's not, I mean, you know, for this specific thing, it has to do with me, but also just backing up and talking about, you know, all three of us. So much has changed since we started this podcast. And a lot of that was to be expected, you know, but kind of going back to myself for a minute, you know, we had just started the podcast, or even before that, we were just thinking about starting the podcast. I remember we had a conversation where we talked about the different priorities in our lives and how we needed to be open and okay with, you know, each one of us, if we had to step away, take a step back from the podcast for a time. I think we understood that even though this was fun and educational and could potentially be a fruitful ministry, you know, it was a worthwhile endeavor. It wasn't our top priority, and it most likely wouldn't have stayed our top priority either. So I think we wanted to make sure that we had to make sure it was clear to each one of us that we had the liberty to take a step back from the podcast if we needed to, especially if the podcast started, you know, getting in the way or taking time away from our commitments with our marriages and our families and local churches. And I think that was wise. We're not always wise, but I do think that was one thing looking back. I was like, okay, that really was good to set that precedent, like up front, you know. And hopefully, Jared, I don't know, hopefully you felt supported when you said, okay, I have to take a step back. You know, I know you guys were expecting Tilly at the time and everything, and for other life reasons too. And hopefully you felt that you had the freedom to do that. Hopefully I'm not assuming there. And
no,
you know, and I didn't expect to be in the same position at the time. I think I was in a little bit of denial with the twins. And sometimes I wonder if and I don't think it was wrong to keep going with the podcast, but sometimes I wonder if I waited too long and held on, you know, kind of in that mindset that trying to operate like a single person or a newly married person, and, you know, not willing to accept the fact that, you know, with these life changes, you know, priorities shift around. There are just going to be practical changes of like time management and what you're able to be involved in and committed to and what takes top priority. And so those things have been on my mind for some time, especially recently. You know, like I said, when we had just started the podcast, you know, Bonnie and I were newly married, and we had just had the twins. We didn't have the twins when we started talking about doing the podcast and kind of committed to doing it. And then we had the twins, but they were younger, on a different sleep schedule. My wife was working part-time, but also on a different schedule, a different job. Since then, you know, she's taken a different job, which has a new schedule. We're working opposite shifts right now. She went back to school last year to complete her bachelor's, kind of a narrow time window to do that. And so with that, I've had to, you know, take on some other responsibilities around the home that we normally could share together that she would do. And so, you know, we've just each have taken on more responsibilities on our own plate. So as a family, it's just gotten really crazy. And I'm not saying that to like justify myself or anything like that, but I think it's helpful for our listeners to know, you know, this
it avoids the conspiracy theories.
That's right.
That's really what it is.
We're trying to avoid what happened when Jared left. So, so whoever that maniac band is out there, they can go on with their life. So yeah, I mean, like those are all things like just me personally, you know, with our family. In a lot of ways, it's similar to Jared, right? I mean, our priority shifted as our family is growing, and now especially when I'm expecting, you know, we're expecting our third one in the spring. You know, it's just like, okay, if I'm struggling now, then it's not going to get any less crazy. Yeah. And also, like, honestly, when the kids are little, like, it takes a lot of time being a father and a parent, but when they are an infant, it's a different kind of time commitment. and you have somewhat more flexibility, like getting into the toddler stage. It's just a lot different. So, yeah. And so realizing that just natural changes with the family, I think has been a big part of it. And then kind of two, again, backing out to all three of us, when we had started the podcast, we were all going to the same church. And so it made a lot more sense in one way. It was a lot easier to get together, to spend physical time. We had the physical studio space for a while there. Or at the time we also were recording physically and present. So it made just a natural and easy environment to record and do a podcast. And so since then we have gone different directions. And I think that's just a natural part of life. In a lot of ways, it's been a blessing too. If you think about, like, now we have 3 different congregations that we're involved in. So I think, there's blessings there too. I don't want to make it sound negative. It's just a natural change of life. But it has made it harder, to record and to spend the time, we need to be doing to really, make it work. And mostly, like, for me, it was when I realized that I wasn't able to dedicate enough time to the podcast and effort to the podcast to do an excellent job with it. That's when I realized, okay, maybe it's time to rethink. We had already talked about dialing it back to every other week. And it was after we had talked about that, I kept praying about it and thinking about it. I was like, I really think, it'd be wiser to say, I think I need to take a step back. We're still trying to work out what that means, and it might change what that means here and there as life changes. But all that to say, I think I will be taking a major step back, because even the amount I was doing, I wasn't able to do a good job. I didn't feel like, case in point, there was one time where someone like had a question about a guest we had on and what that person said. And I was like, well, I'll defer you to Tyler because I wasn't on that episode and I didn't even have a chance to listen to it. So I had no idea, I didn't have a good idea of like what content was getting put out there all the time. And wasn't able to contribute to the content that was getting put out there to the time and to the level that I thought I was. It wasn't fair necessarily to Tyler. It would try to commit to things and not be able to complete that. So at the same time, it was hard because I knew if I take a step back, that's going to be more on Tyler. But, and maybe this is where we could bring you guys back into the conversation here, because we still talked and we weren't like, what I was talking with Tyler about thinking about taking a step back. I was like, hey, I don't think necessarily this means the podcast needs to be done. And one reason I was hesitant because I didn't want it to, especially if you feel like, it's not the time to wrap things up with the podcast, because
Travis,
logistically.
Travis, are you breaking up with me?
We are. I think we're breaking up.
I'm just messing. I had to bring some levity to it.
But I'm good because I know it sounds like and I know I'm like talking a million miles a minute here, and I know like it sounds really heavy, but in a way it is like just coming from my heart. It is something we really cared about and we put a lot of effort into and committed a lot of time to. So it's always hard to admit that, I can't be involved in a level that I'd like to be. So coming to that point was difficult for me, and it probably took longer to get there than was healthier. I should have, but God was kind of like, all right, you need to rearrange your priorities and admit that like not no one's replaceable, but like it's not about you kind of thing. And that was another realization when I was wrestling with motivations for trying to make it work and keep going. Wasn't more about like holding on to something that, you kind of want to have possession of, or that, you have a following in any sense of the word. And I bring that up too, because I want our listeners to know that is in our heart. And when it like, there was that temptation there, I was like, but it's never been like, we've never wanted to be influencers in that sense and kind of gain the following. Like, that's not what we've been about. And I want it to stay that way. And that's just speaking from my own heart. So none of this is a reflection necessarily on you guys. But sure. All that to say, like, that's kind of where we're at. That's saying that I'll be taking a step back. Tyler's going to be continuing on. We're going to continue on. Hopefully I'll be involved on some level. But things are going to change. Our release schedule is going to change. Who's going to be on, who might be involved might change a little bit. And we're still working some things out, but the show will go on. The
show will go on. I don't even like that saying, but we're not done. So So basically what we're going to move to is instead of releasing every week, we're going to try to release on the second and fourth Mondays of every month, basically every other week, except for January, just because I needed some time to put some content together. But so the next episode will be released on January 17th, which is going to be an episode on the first Lord's Day of the Heidelberg Catechism. What is our only comfort in life and death? We're going to answer that question on that episode. And then on the 31st of January will be an episode on the authority and sufficiency of Scripture. So we're going to dive into that, what it means to trust in the Word of God, where it came from. We're going to discuss that a little bit. And then hopefully from there on out, we'll be releasing on the second and fourth Monday of each month. The goal is every other week. Essentially, I don't want to pod fade our audience, which if you're unfamiliar with pod fading, there's like most podcasts that stop after 7 episodes, and it's just because they can't handle the workload. It's just they call it pod fade. So I don't want to do that, but I'm going to be trying my best to maintain a consistent release schedule, and we'll see how that goes. Sometimes it's just going to be me talking about something that I prepared beforehand. Sometimes it's going to be me and a guest. Sometimes it might be me and Travis or Jared, perhaps, coming on and bantering around on some subjects and topics. So the door is always open. It's not my show. It's not anything like that. But, I think it would be appropriate to, at this point, just say some thank yous, right, to the listeners of this show. Because listen, at the end of the day, if we didn't have any listeners on this show, this would still be a good excuse for us to exercise our faith and intellect and, put some work into it. It would still, I know I would still put in the work to it, but it would, this show has caused us to grow and have fun doing it. Having an audience makes this more fun because we get to interact with people that listen to the show. We've gotten to interact with people that have been on the show. I know we've developed relationships with listeners that would not have taken place otherwise, which has been super cool. We have been able to pray for, listen to, and encourage people along the way that God has put in our path because of this podcast. It's honestly mind-blowing to think about. It's super cool. But we go back all the way to the beginning of why we started the show, right? It was to spark some thought in the minds of Christians on topics that are seldom talked about within the church walls. That's kind of what we wanted to do when we first started this. And have we achieved our goal? I think so. But that doesn't mean the conversation is over either. I'm pleased that when I look back on all of the episodes, there's so much that the Lord has done. And it's been so cool to just observe and see what he does through some simple microphones and technology. It's pretty wild. But we've also had people financially support this podcast, which is, again, I don't know why anybody would intentionally listen to my voice for any period of time, but it's just a super incredible blessing. We couldn't do what we do without those that give and without those that pray for this show. So really cool. And as we push into 2022, we're excited to see what God will do and how he uses this podcast. We didn't build any of this. This is all God. Some of the things that we've seen happen have just been unexplainable other than it's God, right? We've been blessed to be instruments that he is using in this period of time. So to our listeners, thank you for being so faithful and listening and giving and praying. Super cool.
Yeah. I would just, second that. It's humbling that anybody listens to us. And I think, partly maybe, and I don't know because I'm not in the head of our listeners, but part of the reason is we tried not to make it about us, we just tried to be a conduit of bringing helpful content to our listeners, and a large part of that is just bringing other helpful resources. We're not trying to make it just our own thoughts. Obviously we have some of our own thoughts, but it's also bringing on guests and things like that. So I think, that's one reason, and that really has been our heart from the start. And we're thankful to our listeners. We're thankful for the Lord for giving us this opportunity, as much as people hate on, white guys our age for starting so many podcasts. It really can be.
Speak for yourself.
It can be a helpful, platform. I think it's a really helpful platform to learn and to grow and to engage with material. And so I've been thankful to be a part of it. I know we've learned a whole lot, but also going back just to what you said about, our our new schedule and how we're not done. I think that's super important, like the whole podcast fading. I think we're going to try to we're still working some things out, but our goal is always to be pretty transparent with our listeners, especially because people do pray for us and financially support us. And so we just think it's the right thing to do. If we plan on officially ending the podcast, I'm trusting in good faith, Tyler is going to let you know. If we're going to put a pause on the podcast, which is the goal of coming back in the future, we'll let you know. Our goal is not to just fade out. And so what this new change doesn't mean is that it's just going to change a little and then slowly fade out. Like we are trying to, and I say this, but it's really Tyler because he's going to be doing a lot of the work. So, you can thank him, but is going to try to maintain a sort of consistency there. But it is going to change some. So
my biggest pet peeve is pod fade.
Yeah. I know a lot of my favorite podcasts did that. I'm like I think there's a strategy there too. Like sometimes when you pod fade, you can also fade back in some ways. Like they would rather do that because they're like, I don't know, are we really done? Are we not? And so we're like, let's leave the door kind of open. But I wish they would have just like put in a disclaimer at like, hey, and some people do, but a lot of my favorite ones just kind of fit. And you're like, so you check back in like a couple times a year, like, was there a new episode? Like, what happened? So that's not our goal. It's one of my pet peeves too.
Yeah. So hopefully that won't happen. That's the goal. But anyway, that's enough heavy stuff for this episode. I don't want to start crying here. So we've been talking about doing a rec episode, rec being short for recommendation.
Since we started the podcast.
Literally since we started the podcast. We've
At least
been wanting
before
to do a
Jared,
rec episode.
like this was before Jared left. So
yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
So I remember this conversation happening, and we're like, we need to make
it's even been in our podcast upcoming podcast topic outlines, and it just kept getting bumped back. Like
bumping it back.
Like in the spreadsheet, you just take it and you drag it to the bottom, and that's happened.
Put it 40 episodes from now. We'll get to it at some point.
Which is kind of impressive because when you go on a spreadsheet, if you keep going, it'll just keep going forever. And to get to the bottom of that,
my goal wasn't to pod fade before we did a rec episode. Just spend a couple minutes doing some recommendations, and just as a disclaimer, we're not being paid to
This was our secondary prayer. Like, the prayer of the single person, like, Lord, don't come back until I get married. And since we all got married now, Lord, don't come back till we do
a rec episode.
Oh my goodness.
So we're going to just share some recommendations. Doesn't matter what it's for or how random it is, but I guess I'll go first and give the guys time to think a little bit. Number one, I've shared this actually on the podcast a couple times, is read The Puritans. It's been super good. Start with The Valley of Vision and the Puritan paperback series from Banner of Truth. I've talked a lot about reading the Puritans on this podcast, but man, my faith has grown like crazy due to the works of God through these men. Just some awesome books like The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment, super good. The Doctrine of Repentance by Thomas Watson, super awesome. You get a little glimpse of history. You get the depths of theology in all these little books. Number two, I subscribe to a service called American Gospel TV, AGTV. And essentially, there are hundreds of resources available to help you grow in your faith. It's like Netflix, but with like good, solid doctrine resources on there. And it's being added to every week. And at $7 a month, it's well worth it. But there's documentaries about reformers, Puritans, even about the modern church. There are sermons, podcasts, Bible studies, what have you. It's all there. It's so good. And lastly, my recommendation, little off topic, is homemade donuts. Jared, I'm sure you can make these, but man, I found a homemade donut shop like 2 miles from my apartment, and I can't get enough of it. It's so good. Go find
you envious.
It's Donut Envy.
Yeah, it leaves you envious.
So good. It's so good. Anyway, that's just my 3 recommendations. But curious, Travis, do you have any recommendations for our listeners?
I'll try to kind of follow your categories a little bit because I like that, and I didn't have time to really think about it ahead of time. So I'm just going to copy a little bit. But kind of going with what you said, reading the Puritans, man, so much rich content there, and so much content. We only have like just a fraction of what was originally published. You know, it's been republished since then. But just really, you know, going off of that, like studying church history, I have learned so much, and I feel like my faith is been so enriched from studying church history and reading these faithful Christians who have come before us. And it really also solidifies your faith. Like, I think we've talked about this some on the podcast, how I think one of the problems, which shows up in a lot of different symptoms, is that Christians don't have a grounding in history in their faith. They don't have a doctrinal grounding. They don't know what they believe or why they believe it. They also don't, they can't put that into a historical context, which is why I think we see so many, one reason we see so many Christians leaving, like, you know, evangelicalism kind of thing for more like Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, different, more, you know, that have a deeper, kind of more mystical, historic, really solid foundation. You feel like something not necessarily just transcendent but beyond you. So people look for that in the architecture and the liturgies and different things like that, which I think is understandable because they're searching for that. I think my answer is really like finding it in church history, you know, itself. You know, obviously, you know, being more reformed as we are, we find it like a lot of that in, you know, the Reformation, but you know, stretching beyond that, you know. So I think a lot of people our age are searching for that. They're just trying to find it in the wrong place. But so I think studying church history is a great way to help with that. So that's one. You mentioned, did you mention music?
I was thinking about it, but I didn't end up mentioning.
I saw that in the notes, and I was just like, I was laughing to myself because you mentioned City of Light and all the other guys, and yes. I just they're solid. I just don't like them. It's a style. It must be a stylistic thing. Like all the people who are lame, and I was like, bleh, 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 bleh. Because, and I don't have a reason. Like they're very talented. And they're really solid. They really are. And I know a lot of people who really enjoy them. To me, I don't know if it's because they feel like they reformed or like solid confessional version of Hillsong or what. I don't know. It's like, it's a style thing. Like,
so I listed City of Light. I listed Sovereign Grace Music. I listed the Gettys, Shane and Shane, and one more, forgetting who. Page CXVI, maybe, I don't remember, but anyway, yeah.
And all of them I would recommend to our listeners. I just personally don't enjoy this, and I don't know. It really must be a stylistic thing.
Travis sits at home, listens to classical music.
I've been listening to like some power metal Christian bands. I don't know. That's been my kick recently. Yeah, along with classical.
That's awesome.
But no, and I guess if I could do a music recommendation, I was listening to Theocracy, which again is kind of power metal, some other metal bands, but like their lyrics are so solid. So if you want something different than, you know, Tyler's music. Just kidding.
I was not expecting you to recommend Theocracy.
Really?
Go you.
Yeah.
I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I know. They're I mean, there's a ton of other bands like that's just a whole one and a bunch of them. But along with listening to like confessional reformed preaching, yeah, again, like some of this would contain the Puritans, you know, obviously they would contain a bulk of them, but people, even like modern preachers who carry on in that confessionally reformed tradition, their preaching has been so rich. I'm so thankful I get to sit under that type of preaching in my local church. But, you know, if you can't, you know, another recommendation like Sermon Audio, there's all these other platforms that have thousands of sermons on there. You know, I've been listening to a lot of Joel Abiki. He's one guy, I think he's the founder of Reformed Heritage Books, but also Reformed Puritan Theological Seminary. Did I say that right? Puritan Reformed Theological Seminary. Obviously, carrying on the tradition of the Puritans. So if we want to get a slight modern taste of what the Puritan, like sitting under Puritan preaching was probably like he's one of them, you know. I think he's Dutch, maybe more in the Dutch Reformed. I don't know. But anyway, it's really good. And then another random one, throwing it out there because Tyler mentioned donuts, is Fresh Meat.
Yes.
You know, I've been I've been trying to get back into hunting, and I don't have fresh meat on the table yet because I haven't gotten anything.
I love how you introduced that. You were like fresh meat. You know,
the meat's back on the menu, boys. Not
That's
yet,
awesome.
but no, just getting back into hunting, like getting outside is my this is my overarching, recommendation, whether that be hunting, hiking, etc. We've talked about struggling with seasonal depression and stuff. I don't know if we all do. I know I do. Tyler, I think you do as well. But getting outside is a big, helps me a lot. But getting out there, exercising, but along with that, doing pay attention to diet. I've been bad about that, trying to get better. One thing I've found, just fresh sources, whether it be fresh meat, fresh produce. Jared can chime in here. He's a chef, so he knows all these things.
Yes. 100%.
If you can, it's so good.
What about you, Jared? Do you got any recs for us today?
Yeah, I got a couple. So I've got 4 or 5 books that I want to recommend, some music, and a food thing.
Cool.
So Gentle and Lowly, The Heart of Christ for Sinners and Sufferers by Dane C. Ortlund. Oh, hey, you've got it. Tyler's got it.
That's right.
Have you read it?
Yeah,
I haven't read it yet. It must be like everybody's been talking. Well, not now, but go back a couple months. I feel like everyone's talking about it. So, and a lot of people highly recommended it. Yeah. I just had a large reading list that I haven't been able to work through yet. So,
super solid book, and that's just your walk with Christ. Another one that's really good with just battling the reality between our suffering and spiritual warfare and how they're combined. This book called The Bondage Breaker by Neil T. Anderson. Huge recommendation, 100%. If you're struggling with any kind of anything, just read through that book. Obviously it's not the Bible. It's not going to overtake that, but it has a lot of great steps to help you look towards the scriptures, to help you walk through that, whether it be depression, addiction, anxiety, whatever. And then on a more relational side, the book Mingling of Souls by Matt Chandler. That is, such a good book. And if you're in a relationship, if you are thinking about getting into a relationship, if you're engaged, married, been married for 10 years, I think it's a solid book for any of those categories. Just kind of giving you the perspective of what God's design for relational love is like. So yeah, those are my book recommendations. Musical recommendation, I would say listen to A Beautiful Eulogy.
Ooh, yeah.
That's a good one.
They are a solid band.
That's right.
Every time I listen to them, I just get I feel like I'm getting side blinded by a cinder block.
I have to be careful though when I listen to them, because I almost get depressed listening to them. Because I always feel way convicted. Yeah, I have to be I have to be careful, but they're so good. Yeah. It's so much truth.
Moderation. Yeah. But I mean, every time I listen to them, I'm just pointed towards scripture, and I'm just man, the way that he depicts the Christian walk. And in the one album, A Beautiful Eulogy, he describes it as a kite, and that kite string is Christian love, and God is the one holding the string. And I just love that imagery. And lastly, my food recommendation would be get into sourdough, guys. Make sourdough bread. The Lord has been teaching me things through bread.
He uses a lot of bread metaphors. I'm guessing you're not on this keto phase.
Oh no, definitely not. I love bread too much. But the Lord has been showing me a relationship with Christ is a lot like making bread. You can read a book and it can tell you how to make bread. And you can say, yes, I know how to make bread in my head. But when you go to make it, there are so many problems that can happen. It can go flat. It can have no flavor. There's so many different things that can happen. When you actually go and make bread with your own 2 hands, and you're feeling the dough, and you're equating yourself with the ingredients, and you're understanding how much to knead it to get the gluten, what it's like to have a relationship with Christ. You can read the Bible, and that's good, and that's great, and you'll have a lot of knowledge, but you won't know God until you start a relationship with him. And like, in this metaphor, he's the baker and we're the dough, right? He kneads us and stretches us and discards parts that he doesn't need and adds salt and takes away and whatever he wants to do.
That he could discard. My belly.
Yeah, you and me both.
Cut off some fat there. Sorry.
No, you're okay. But in the end, like, that relationship is the most important part. Like, I like how John Piper says, like, desire God above all else. Like, if you are desiring him, he is glorified in you. Mm. And when you're making bread, what are you desiring right there? You're desiring to have a loaf of bread that you can eat and taste and sense and smell and just take it in. And when we work on our relationship with Christ, we are desiring to have unity with him and to be with him and smell him and taste him and love him. So sourdough, try it out.
Taste and see that the Lord is good. I know, I actually did get a little hungry there.
Man, that made me remember, like, growing up, we used to like have Amish stands like along the way home from the town, and we used to pick up like their fresh bread and stuff, fresh baked goods.
Oh yeah,
so good.
It's crazy. The Lord, like, I don't know if it's because I'm in ministry that works with food or what, but like, the Lord has really been showing me things through food lately. And I've just really been noticing it. And I don't know, the Lord just kind of put on my heart to share it. Yesterday I was sorting out raspberries, and I was making a compote or something. And I was, looking through them and seeing, okay, this one's rotten, throw it out. This one's good, put it in a bowl. And I was doing that, and I was like, wow,
sheep in the tea.
Imagine if that's how the Lord looked at us. Like, imagine if he just looked at us and said, wow, this one's rotten, I'm going to throw it out. This one's good, let me put this in the bowl and use it. Instead, he says, wow, this one's rotten, let me cut the rod off and then use it for something better.
I love
Make something wonderful with it. So, I don't know. Food's cool.
Jared always had the best imagery and illustrations, and I miss that.
Yeah.
I could tell that you are a lover of the Pilgrim's Progress. I could tell that you love that book. It's so good.
Oh my goodness, it's the best. It is the best.
So
book.
Hungry.
Next to the Bible.
Well, this was a lot of fun, guys. I really enjoyed having us all together, and just what a blessing it is to reunite on this episode. A really cool thing to do. Cool. Well, we've appreciated all the listenership on this podcast. But don't forget, join us. We'll be back on January 17th, the third Monday of January, with an episode. And from there on out, hopefully every other week. So join us on the Happy Holy Hour. If you have any questions about any of this and you want to have a deeper conversation with one of us about what it means to follow Jesus, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our email is happyholyhour@gmail.com. You can send us an email there, or you can connect with us over social media. We'd be glad to reach out in that way. Remember to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Leave a review so others can find the show. And lastly, visit our website, www.thehappyholyhour.org, for some really helpful resources. Until next time, God bless.